What's going on, Jordan?
Just waking up, trying to chug some coffee here. Had a late night.
That you always have to get up so early. What were you doing? Bashing? You almost hit a homeless person. That was
bashing.
I'm sorry, you didn't almost hit him.
He fell on
captured.
his own. Yeah.
He took a dive.
He took a dive. I felt bad, but I also felt like I needed to. To be clear, I don't know that he was homeless. I think
yeah.
He might have been.
Know. He just enjoys taking shopping carts through the.
He was pushing. Street. No, it was a person in a wheelchair that he was pushing. This sounds terrible now that I'm saying it.
I like the version that I had of it.
No, he was like pushing, another person in a wheelchair across like 5 lanes of traffic, and then like tripped on sort of nothing, and then like rolled. And
he took a dive.
Yeah,
he launched.
Yeah, it was.
He looked like he stepped on a landmine that was non-explosive, but just like created a shockwave.
And that's part of the dystopia that San Francisco is now, where like no one even like batted an eye or looked or tried to help, but he was like up and he was fine. But
that's kind of like what life is like, huh? You're always like, someone else will take care of it.
Right. I was just like, well, I'm going to save that video clip. And like, that was pretty much my contribution to society. So if you're
fact, that's called the bystander effect, actually, when you think like someone else is going to handle it.
Well, nowadays, dude, I just feel this is actually another idea for like a discussion, but I feel so hesitant to get involved with things because of like how triggered people get. You know what I mean? Like,
sure.
Like if it's a woman, I'm worried that they're going to be like, I don't need a man's help. Or if it's like a dude, I feel like they're going to be like, yo, bro, I can get this on my own. Or like someone's going to get like triggered by my assumption that they need help, you know what I mean? And it's just like,
right.
It's terrible, but oftentimes, or like you see a little kid and they're like alone and like having a problem with something, and it's just like, I'm not gonna get accused of like trying to freaking pick up some little kid and like lure him, it's like, I just don't help. I just stay away.
Weird. It makes us more disconnected.
Yeah.
I feel like if I'm doing something genuine, and I honestly know I'm doing it genuinely, and I'm not in my head or in my heart have any feeling of abuse, I just do it anyway. If someone takes it a certain way, well, this is life and we'll figure it out.
Yeah, you're a better man than I.
What have you been into, man? Any pods, videos, movies, music, books?
Well, I talked about, the AI one, still reading that. Kind of trying to prep. So there's this AI conference that's going on in Berkeley in a couple of weeks, or it's like a month out. And one of the guys who's there is the author of the book called Human Compatible. So he's, I guess, sort of the foremost expert in artificial intelligence, but I don't even know how you would quantify that, but pretty interesting stuff. He seems to think, it's quite a ways out, but just kind of talking about the fundamentals of sort of what we should consider to be AI and things to look out for, but also all the benefits that we'll see from it, yada, yada, yada. But been reading that, and in terms of watching stuff, embarrassing stuff. I was flipping through Hulu and we stumbled on the show 90 Day Fiancé. Have you ever seen that?
No.
So the whole premise is
I get it.
Yeah, it's so the premise is just like a bunch of people, what is it, the K-1 visa, where you have to, if you want to move to the U.S., you have to be here for 90 days, or you only have 90 days to make the decision. So it's like a bunch of people who had like met their fiancés in, other countries. They bring them over, they have 90 days to like get everything in order and get married. And it's just like, some of them are like, oh, it's totally normal, this is a normal relationship. They just met somebody in a different country. Other ones are just like, clearly this person is, like in it for the green card. And
this is like what happens with Macedonian incels. So I'm aware of this phenomenon. They didn't have to make a show of it. I've watched people in my family live this. If you were like the incel, they ship you off to Macedonia to like point someone out in a village. And then this guy just got married all of a sudden.
Right. And it's like, it's just so awkward. It's kind of like, you ever watch Curb Your Enthusiasm and you just can't look away because it's so uncomfortable. Like some of these there was this one where it was like what was it? I think he was like 25 or something, dude from Tunisia, marrying this like 56-year-old woman who's like not all there mentally, and it was just like clearly the dude's taking advantage of her, but he's like, and he keeps like coming up with reasons not to like kiss her and stuff. He's like, my religion prevents me from kissing you. I like, you know, when it's like sunny outside and all this shit. It was,
sure.
Yeah, it's not a good time. But anyway, so that's my guilty pleasure for this week. So after I binge watch that, I'll have to find another reality show.
Yeah, I usually just subscribe to those services, flick through the tiles, never watch anything, and then turn it off after 1 hour of flicking through tiles and being confused with all the content that I have access to. And then I just do that on my phone afterwards.
There's a lot of good, I mean, there's some, not that that's an example of good shit, but there's a lot of pretty good shows on right now, I'd have to say.
It's hard to commit, man. It's very hard to commit.
Well,
for me.
There's
hard to commit.
No commitment. It's not like you're stuck watching the show if you don't.
But you are kind of, because you have to give it a chance. Like, I got to give it an hour. Do I want to give you that long? Game of Thrones, I didn't like Game of Thrones for the first 3 hours. So that one was like, what if I didn't like it after that? See, that's 3 hours of my life.
That's a good example of one that I've tried to watch several times now because everybody's so obsessed with it, and I just can't do it, man. I don't know. Like, I get judged for it, but like maybe I need to give it a more chance. But it's like if I'm like 4 or 5 episodes in and it's not sucking me in, like, come on.
I feel like it's fair. Maybe it's not your thing.
Right. Maybe I'm not into dragons. Sorry, I'm not like, you know, a 12-year-old in 1976, you know.
Yeah, it took me a while, but after a few hours, when I got into it, I was into it. It's very political. I wasn't into it for the fantasy, but there's like sex, violence. I think that attracts a huge crowd and a huge demographic. Obviously, the fantasy appeals for many different reasons. Everybody on the show is attractive, so it's like if you're the dork and you're very timid and avoidant, it's like you could find any person to identify with in there, and then you feel potent. So then you watch it and you follow their storyline. And
well, I am the dork, so yeah, that sounds appealing.
We're all the dork. That's why I think that's why that show is so broadly accepted. That's the books that I've been reading / listening to on audiobook are those Witcher books. The video game is known as Witcher. The books are Blood of Elves, Time of Contempt, and I don't know, I'm on the second book, but it's very much political, like what I think appealed to me about Game of Thrones and what appealed to other people about it, but I don't know. I feel like you should check that one out if you're into a fiction. Again, it's fantasy, but it's emphasized obviously, but because you're reading about it, I think it's a little different when you're watching something. They don't have to the screenplay, if that's the right word, takes place and you see all the fantasy. When you're reading about it in a book, it almost seems like they're more focused on creating the universe, but then not writing so much about all of the fantastical things, but there's a lot of focus on political stuff in there, and it's kind of interesting. Gia. What else, man? What you got?
In terms of watching stuff, I watch. Have you seen the movie Heat? Like the 90s action movie. That's
why I bought a gun.
That's why I don't go to banks. Yeah, I don't know if you listen to the Rewatchables podcast, but that was like I think their first podcast, and they just did. I think they're 100 episodes in. They just did a reheat where they rewatched Heat and did commentary on it. But I had bought it on. I have it on every medium. Like I have it on like VHS, DVD, Blu-ray, and then I bought it it was on sale on iTunes a few weeks back. So I bought it there and just started watching it last night because I just listened to the podcast of it. It's like, God, what a good fucking movie. Just every time. It's like one of those movies that has just totally stood up. I mean, there are like little things about it that reference technology and that's, but I think like that's like sort of the hallmark of a good movie now is like if they don't incorporate a bunch of like really timely technological things, then you can watch it 25 years later or whatever and be like, oh, it's still fucking great. And that's one of them.
Just like cars. Just like cars.
Yeah.
They age a lot faster when they get advanced.
Exactly. But yeah.
Commando also ages well.
Well, Commando.
Bloodsport.
I've not seen Bloodsport, I don't think.
Come on, dude.
I mean, like I have, but I don't know that one shot for shot like I would know Commando.
That was my introduction into manhood when I was 4 years old. It was great.
So you've based your entire sort of persona around Bloodsport.
Being an 80s action hero, of course. Tight. Don't you recognize that when you meet me and look at me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's going on, man? What's our topic for the day?
So I was thinking, I've been listening to a lot of different podcasts and watching some documentaries. I don't know why I pronounced it that way. About documentaries about sort of autonomous vehicles and automation and robotics sort of taking over. So I wanted to get your take on that because I think people are sort of increasingly scared about it and worried about what the implications are for their safety and their jobs, particularly as it comes to cars, thinking through all these scenarios. And I think, as having sort of one of the first vehicles that are kind of diving into that with autopilot, I have one take on it, and I'm curious to get what your take on it would be and kind of talk through how we think society is going to react to that.
Yeah, as you and I mentioned off mic or off camera or whatever, there's a couple different categorizations of that. One obviously being, autonomous vehicles and their, them coming into the market and strong push for for all the companies to put them in the market. But then also just automation at large, like you're talking about like factories and I don't know, just in the industrial world, just having things automated. My take on it, I feel like I may have a different take on it than what the majority of people may have. Again, because it's coming more from, let's say, like a psychological background and the lens that I'm viewing it from. Fortunately / unfortunately, I'm cursed to always see things that way, which may give me a different insight. But which you're referring to autonomous vehicles or automation in general? Is that what you're asking?
Well, so let's start with the car thing. I mean, I guess high level, the interesting thing, I think when you hear discussions about this, I always hear these sort of fanciful, well, what if the car, it's driving itself and there's a little kid walking down the street on one side and there's an old man walking down the street on the other side. And then suddenly the car in front of you stops and the only way you can avoid smashing into a car and killing 4 people is by veering off the side of the road and hitting the old man or the young person. Like, how do you program the robot to make that determination? Whose life is more valuable? And it's like, well, yeah, but also, I've been driving for a number of years now. That particular scenario has never happened to me. I'd wager that it's never happened to really anybody. And fundamentally, I end the argument as simply as a robot would actually be able to make a decision more effectively and quicker than we could in that scenario, because I think what you would do is just panic and jerk the wheel. And
I think it would definitely be more consistent. Right. It would make this decision more consistent.
It would have more data and it would be able to process it more quickly. Would you like the outcome? Maybe not. I mean, depending on if you were the old guy or the little kid or their families. But those scenarios don't seem to me to be valid. What I'm more worried about is statistically, if you've got a bunch of robots driving, this is years down the road. If you've got a bunch of robots driving and they're 99.999% effective and safe compared to humans, which are fucking terrible at operating anything.
What is the statistic for humans? Like how often do we have operator error? I'm curious about that.
Operator error would be hard to quantify.
Like hours driving and how many fucking... Whoops.
It's not...
How many people did you run over or crash?
I mean, personally, I've not run over any people.
Right.
Even the guy who fell down right in front of me.
Yeah. But there's people that are probably running people over all day long.
Right.
So that's like the other... kidding. But the other end of the outlier. So I am curious what the user error is for people. I don't know that data. But you're looking at it from a safety perspective?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm thinking... Okay, so break it down. Like right now, we have, I think, what would be considered... level 3 autonomy out of a possible 6. I could be full of shit on the level, but basically
I know what you're talking about.
We're only in the phase where you have some levels of automation where you still need a human operator as backup or as like performing most functions. In the case of, Tesla or GM Super Cruise or the more advanced systems on the market, it'll, on a highway, it'll steer, it'll control the throttle, it'll maintain a consistent gap behind the car in front of you, but you're not going to get in it in your garage, set your destination at work, and then like take a nap. That's just, it's allegedly coming, but frankly, with the hardware that we have today, that's a long way out. It just doesn't have the means of sensing its surroundings with that kind of accuracy where I would trust it with my life yet. That said,
sure,
the differences between the car that I have in my garage and the car that, our parents had in their garage, like I have no doubt in my mind that that's coming, and that it'll be something we see on the consumer market within 10 years, let's say, where you'll be able to buy a car where you'll just get in, set a destination, and it'll take you there. And that will not be uncommon. So the question is fundamentally, why would we do that? I think it's kind of twofold. One, I like to think it's because of safety, right? Because if you introduce humans into it, you bring in human error.
Sure.
That's dangerous. And then second, just the quality of life, right? Like we are expanding out and out and out and out and out. There's more and more people. I personally, I can have depending on traffic, my commute could be an hour. It's already quite a bit better because I don't have to pay super close attention because the autopilot will drive for me. But the thought of being able to do literally anything I wanted to in the car, it would make it almost no different than if I was at home, right? Other than I can't wander around and work out or go for a walk or whatever. I could sit in the car and get work done on the way to work.
Would you?
Sure. I mean, imagine a scenario where if you have an 8-hour workday, what if you left 2 hours later, but just worked on the way, right? Like you just take care of your conference calls and shit like that. The car's driving itself. Or if you...
I think there would be a specific demographic that may help. This is like, I have,
you can't, for example, right?
For sure.
Yeah. Yeah, you
right.
could.
I'm not going to, just come with me on the ride, patient.
But
we'll
okay,
talk this.
But imagine it. Okay, so then in that scenario,
Yeah.
What if you stayed a little late and, went to the gym by your office and then drove home later, and then just you maybe watch a couple shows when you get home after the gym normally, but instead you just pop Netflix on in the car and you're doing it in the car. So I think it's just about the convenience factor of shifting things around because now you can do it in your vehicle, right? Like most people, maybe not you, maybe not me, but they're just going to go home and sit down and watch TV for a couple hours or whatever every night, or take conference calls or whatever when they get to work. So I think the convenience factor that having a car or any sort of vehicle just drive itself, I think that's a game changer.
Yeah, I guess there's two things that come... Well, there's probably more, but the two things that come to mind for me. Your mention of the safety concerns and people's, catastrophization, is that the word? Of safety concerns. It seems like that's more prominent in the programming world, or the people that are engineering these systems, because someone actually, is going to have to sign off on it. I can see why they're more cautious, because they may be worried about lawsuits or whatever as the programmer or the developer or the company. I wonder if that may have trickled its way out into the world, and then, people start thinking these catastrophic ideas of how it could be harmful. So that part, the safety part, is actually not something that concerns me, but I could see why the developers would be concerned with that for liability reasons, or why general consumers perhaps may be concerned with that. I'm talking like I'm not a general... Why most people would be concerned about that, but for me, that's not the thing. You're talking about this additional time. It's like, what are you really going to do? Just listen to more ads, with your time? You know what I mean? I know you're saying you're going to go on Netflix. There's this... For me, I feel that automation at large, let's say, but in the context of automated vehicles, yeah? So you're getting into the car and you're separating yourself from an experience. And the experience consciously, it may not be something that is affecting you consciously. However, it's an experience that I think you have to have that subconsciously teaches you how to negotiate problems. It teaches you how to solve abstract problems. It teaches you how to have impulse control. It teaches you how to have patience. In some cases, you and I as car people, it gives you pleasure, a sense of pleasure. And I worry that autonomous vehicles are another step towards us getting more and more separated from using our senses to navigate through the world. In this case, literally navigate through the world, but also speaking figuratively, to navigate through the world. And then we feel disconnected, and our additional time is consumed with, hey, let me watch a fantasy. Let me watch a Netflix instead of living in the world right now. Or let me, whatever, become bombarded. Well, let me get more bombarded by ads.
Well, here's a counterpoint to that, though.
Sure.
Do you fly your own plane? I mean, when
you
go
but somewhere, I don't have that skill.
No,
I don't have that skill.
But I'm saying, do you think that planes disconnect us? Because if anything, I would argue the opposite. I would say that because I don't think, you're an enthusiast, I'm an enthusiast, we like to drive cars. If we had our druthers, we'd have 30 different cars that would, with manual transmissions and whatever. We want to be involved because we find that fun, the skill of driving. Most people don't give a shit, right? And I think for them, the thought of, I think driving a car for many people is a stressful thing that they like to avoid, myself included, when it comes to like the mundane, driving to the city, dealing with this terrible traffic, trying to find parking, worrying about the car getting broken into, in the case of San Francisco, because that just happens all the time now, because it's a shit show. Like,
is that going to stop if you had an autonomous car?
No, but I'm just saying, like, well, maybe, because the car could leave and go park back at my house, you know what I mean? So all of the
guns on it.
Right, it would have like a thing that just came out and like batted people away. But all of those things are stressors. The act of operating my car does not make any of those go away. All it does is it actually adds to it. Whereas when I get on an airplane and I let a pilot fly me to, Hawaii or whatever, and I get out, it's like I'm relaxed. I'm thinking about right. I mean, traveling.
Air travel is stressful. Security.
True.
Turbulence.
Okay, but I guess in terms of like the act of actually operating the vehicle, to me, if I think about what would happen in my life if suddenly my car could just drive itself, I'd be taking a lot more sort of day trips on the weekend places. Because like if I didn't have to think about, like, if right now I could just roll out of bed, get in my car, and be like, take me down to, the beach a couple hours away or whatever, where there are fewer people, and I'll just take a nap on the way. I mean, I think that would unite people. So I think, yes, it would disconnect you from the act of piloting, whatever car you're taking to get down there. I think it would unite people, and that they would be much more willing to travel. So older people who are scared of driving or don't have, the reflexes that they once have, and they don't visit their kids anymore, like, they would be more apt to sort of take those kind of trips, or vice versa. And if you could tend to your children while you were driving versus just like throwing them in the back of your van and having to pull over every 10 minutes, like, I think it would help to unite people, not divide us.
You make good points. The points that you make, I feel like are very valid. I guess the part that concerns me, the part that concerns me about it is slowly, I feel like we're just giving up pieces. Like, just little by little, we're giving up these little pieces of things that we have to get skills for, and like learning things that we have to do, and like being in contact with the world. So like I jotted notes down on a digital display, you know what I mean? Like my stupid tablet or my iPad, and I jotted notes down. So it's like, I don't have to feel a piece of paper. I don't have to plan for the next piece of paper. I understand what you mean. So you're reducing the amount of vigilance that you have to have while operating the vehicle. If you're comparing it to like flight, obviously, I don't know statistics on anything pretty much, but I would be willing to guess that, I don't know, what do people drive 1,000% more than they fly? I don't know, more than that? I don't even know what that number means.
Well,
like
in terms of a distance, I would say
no, like so let's say I go to Europe. So let's say, because my wife's family lives there, I travel on airplane, let's count it 20 hours a year, right? So 20 hours a year for something very highly skilled or whatever that needs to happen. Yeah, a pilot would have to take care of that. It's a small amount of time. I'm not dedicating a lot of my life to doing it. I'm not having a lot of experience in an airplane anyway. You're having a lot of experience in a car. For me, which is, I'm on the extreme end of how far I drive, it's about 2 hours a day on a good day. 2 hours to 2.5 hours. I know it could be similar for you as well. So 2 hours every day, I'm interacting with the world. Again, it requires more vigilance, like you're saying. It's stressful. I have to execute a task. But it keeps me connected. It makes me aware of danger. It makes me aware of, like I'm forced to make decisions. I have to see other people on the road and like, oh yeah, go ahead and go in. Or I have to be considerate of like, maybe I shouldn't merge here. Like maybe I shouldn't merge.
I think you're more involved mentally than most are. I mean, I think you're like giving people a lot of the benefit of the doubt when the reality is most people are just like, get me the fuck out of this car and get me to my destination. Like I think that is the typical person. To the counterpoint to both of those things though, in terms of like spending less time in planes, sure, but think about the distance that you travel, right? I mean, as a means of traversing vast distances, air travel, you might only fly 20 hours a year, but you're covering a hell of a lot more distance than you drive, I would bet, right? I mean, when you fly to Europe and back once, that's probably more than you're driving the rest of the year.
A year?
Yeah. I mean, that's...
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to do that maths. What's the Earth's total circumference? I don't know.
Well, you're not flying around the Earth, but like...
Yeah. But I was going to make a little calculation based on that. But whatever, however many miles it is.
The Earth's circumference is like 25,000 miles.
Okay. So, hey, man, I drive 29,000 miles a year.
Okay, so fuck you. So, maybe you're the exception here. But even so, let's say it was even.
Yeah.
Let's say you're flying
right.
like 1 or 2 international flights a year, and like just that it equals the like 10,000 other little drives that you're doing. So as a means of transportation, it's much more efficient. It's cover bigger distances. And when we're talking about autonomy, we're thinking about like making a car kind of like in the sense that you have it today, autonomous, so it could drive itself. There's also other types of autonomy that are likely coming where like it'll probably be more ride sharing. You're going to summon some robot car to pick you up, take you somewhere, and then leave, and then you don't have to, it's not yours. Maybe you pay for a service where it's like Lyft or Uber. I mean, that's what they're working on, but you pay for a level of service and you either get a ship box or a medium, sort of mid-size luxury sedan, or you get like a limo, but it's not yours. And all the way down to like the autonomy of trains and things where we have hyperloops going all over and we can traverse greater and greater distances. I mean, it's a big country and a big world that we live in. I think having a robot do the actual driving will help people rather than hurt them. And I even see it with the shitty sort of intro autonomy in my car, where it's like you still definitely need to pay attention. You still definitely are driving a decent percentage of the time. When I'm going to work, it allows me to just kind of disconnect a little bit more. On road trips, the difference in physically how I look and feel when I get somewhere after driving for like 5-6 hours, hugely different. I think I'm
not going to argue that with you. Yes, that I agree with. There's definitely fatigue when you're operating for a long time due to the amount of vigilance dedicated to the task of driving.
Right.
Yeah.
Even like the difference, I noticed this too the other way, where like, in the US, I think people just are kind of, I'm in my lane and I'm doing, kind of around the speed limit. And if you want to get around me, fuck you. Whereas driving in Germany, I was there last summer, and it's illegal to pass on the right. You have to pass on the left. Everybody's fucking flying, and the level of vigilance to make sure that you're not getting in people's way. I mean, so I was going like 130 miles an hour for like hours, and I was running people down myself. I was getting run down by other people. I was very, very, very focused for let's call it 3 hours. When I got to where we were going, I felt like, yeah, it was cool that I got to drive fast, but like, fuck, man, I'm so like, it was almost pointless because now I'm just going to go take a nap or like zone out for a while.
Right.
Whereas I'm thinking about even the car just having driven itself 70 miles an hour, slow, it would have taken another hour to get where we were going, but I would have been a lot more relaxed than if I would have been able to like do stuff along the way. I feel like that's huge quality of life impact.
That part of it, I feel like I don't have a fair counterpoint to that. It does, obviously it would reduce fatigue in some situations. The part that I'm most concerned with is a piece, like I've mentioned, that I think it goes into a bigger problem that I think we're having as a society. Mm-hmm. And then I'll provide you a thing that maybe is a happy medium. I just thought of this as you were talking about it. So driving for you, many people before, I don't know, this, let's say like right in the last few years, it was like a rite to passage. It was like a rite to passage in some way. Like you grew up, you got your own autonomy before the autonomous vehicle happened, or some slice of autonomy, and you received your license and you felt accomplished and you felt like a big boy or girl, and you were ready to go into the world and pick up your friends and feel really cool and feel like you accomplished something with your car, right? And it was an accomplishment that happened based on you needing to gain these specific skills to pass a road test. So like, you feel accomplished. Hey, I did this thing, right? So that stuff goes away, man. And I know we're just referring to it in the sense here of cars, like that rite of passage of cars. But there's all these other adaptations that I think are, going to be reduced or taken away, that someone has to have, that makes them feel competent, capable, these little micro accomplishments. Even
that's already happening though, right? I mean, kids are already deciding.
That's why it's sad.
It's sad.
They don't drive. Kids I see don't drive. Patients that I see, they're not excited to get their life. There are some of them that are very productive, and you see it in their personality. Very, I don't like, but I feel like most people know what I'm talking about. I don't like this classification, but I'm going to say it anyway. Very type A. Those kids are on point, and they're working, and they're doing extracurricular stuff, and they're doing really well in school, and they're keeping their social life together. Perhaps they're too busy, I would argue, but they go and get their licenses. And then there's this whole other group that's hoping for someone else to solve the problem for them. And we're like looking to the parents, Tesla, Ford, GM, whatever, all these manufacturers that are going to that have this stuff are going to have this stuff. And we're saying like, hey, can you get us there? Can you get us there? You're going to do it, right? Because I don't know how to use a map. Can you please get us there? How about this, man? Since implementation of GPS, my navigating skills have become terrible. Terrible, dude. I don't have to remember streets, bro. I don't have to remember them.
I mean, we've lived...
It's so bad.
We've lived in this town for like 2.5 years, and sometimes I'm like, wow, I really... Like, if I take a different way home, I'm like, I have no idea how to get home from, like, just the grocery store,
Ask me where I live. I can't describe it to you. I can't. Even though I drive there, just because I don't have to have internal map in my head, I can't. If you're like, hey, where do you live in Ann Arbor? I can't. And I've been living here for 5 years now. I just can't remember the streets, dude, because my brain has decided that, hey, man, you don't need to store any of this information anymore.
But
just use your nav system.
So I guess to the point about that changing, I mean, one, you were mentioning like you're writing your notes down on a digital medium, you're not writing down on a pen and paper. Like that's just the current manifestation of a technology, right? Like pen and paper are also technologies, ones that we've had a lot longer and that are more a part of society than the iPad maybe still, like, I mean, in terms of like across the entire planet, more people are still just kind of writing shit down on paper, but it's still a human invention, right? It's not a part of like our DNA. Sure. And in the same way that like driving is a newer thing, right? Like you could argue fewer people are getting married, and that's sort of a manifestation of like a new
social, like that's problematic too.
Social norm. Sure, but it's like because it's different, is it bad? I don't know. I mean, I understand the argument for people who are just like, what the fuck is it? Like, why does it matter if you get married or not? I can respect that choice. So to me, things that change are not bad. I'm just wondering about the apprehension that people have and sort of what it is. For you, it seems like a disconnection from what you see as something that...
Being human, living in the world, interacting, solving problems, being stressed, learning how to maintain it. Like, do I have to watch this YouTube video now? Or can I just focus myself for 1 hour and drive this car and get there, and then I'll have my YouTube video at the end of it.
But you're thinking about it in a very polarized way, like that it's a switch will flip next week and suddenly you'll be not driving a car at all. I mean, this will take...
I'm not... Yeah. That's... You're right about that. That is how I'm thinking about it. But I guess I worry that little by little we're chipping away things that connect us to the world. Like even digital gauge clusters on a car. Right? It's like I'm not even looking at a real digital gauge cluster. I know now this is a departure from autonomous, but whatever. It's like I'm never getting to interact with the world. I'm seeing something that's a ones and zeros sequence that's telling a display to simulate a gauge cluster to, whatever, for my brain to assume like, oh yeah, that thing is a clock or that thing is a map or So,
but again, don't you think when the car was first sort of becoming mainstream, that people who rode horses around and shit weren't thinking the same thing. Like, you're getting, it's like, I got to take care of this animal. I have to feed it. It's a part of my life. I live and die around this horse. I ride it somewhere I can feel the wind on my face and in my hair. And then you're going to just take this thing and pour fuel in it and ignite it, and it's going to take you places. I mean, it's so impersonal. It's dehumanizing. Like, you don't think that they thought that then as well? This is just the current manifest.
No. I understand that. I was actually going to use a horse perspective, and I was going to actually relate to how a car is like a horse, but whatever. That's just
comparatively more like a horse than a robot.
Sure,
but
sure.
Still different than. I mean, yeah, I'm sure that was a huge change for people who lived during that sort of transition period.
Right. Yeah, but right, they don't have the skills then of like navigation and, you know, decision making based on weather patterns or whatever sort of shit you would do when you would. I don't even know enough about any of that, but yeah, hey, I'm going to take this horse here. How long is it going to take? What are the road conditions? Sure, we've lost that ability. I guess I'm just wondering if we've gotten to a tipping point where all of this advancement is so non-human that we're now non-human, and this is why, you know, we have a huge increase of mental health issues, a huge increase of, you know, obviously this also falls in the category, but suicide rates are going up. It's like 30% increase in the last, I believe it's 10 years. I don't know, if someone fact check it, but it's just these huge increases, and, you know, we're all unhealthy and we're all just miserable and we're not motivated, and we don't launch at the same times that we used to in our life, and it just, I don't know. I feel like this is another manifestation.
I mean, look,
that's what I worry about it. I'll give you my medium, though, my in between your argument and my argument. Can I give it to you? Or do you have a counterpoint?
Well, I was just going to say, yeah. I mean, and I think, again, it's a polarized view that I feel like you're presenting, where it's sort of this all or nothing. This is the path we're headed down, and you see this as sort of perpetuating that.
It's the end of the world.
Right. But, and I agree. I mean, I think that we're becoming, in our connection to each other through the internet, I think we're becoming disconnected because everything is so impersonal, and there are just so many people with so many fucking ideas, good and bad, and we've talked about that. But this is not, to me, this is almost less connected to that. It's more connected to taking a stressor away and making operating a vehicle not a part of who you are, not requiring this training, not it's like it's removing impediments to connecting people physically rather than introducing more impediments, which like the internet has done. Because now I feel like, and fucking kids don't even, they go home and they just like hop on, you know, Call of Duty and like
trust
chat
me
with their
every
friends.
day.
Yeah,
have to tell the kids like, hey man, say hi first, hang out, let me talk to you before you get absorbed into YouTube death spiral.
Right, but imagine,
So, yeah.
imagine for 1 second if they could go, you know, there was a trusted service where they could just walk outside, their Uber thing would pick them up and take them, and they could go play soccer with their friend. Like, you didn't have to drive them there, so you didn't have that logistic.
But I rode a bike, bro, or I had to call people's parents to pick me up. My parents worked a lot, so they were semi-negligent with my schedule. It taught me how to be adaptive. I personally found out my friends' phone numbers, kept track of that, and knew when I was going to my soccer games and would ask them, you know, I feel so bad for the people I grew up with. Thank you for helping me. I feel like I should go on a tour of thanking people for like, thank you.
The Mike Krzyzewski
I know I was
thank
annoying.
you tour.
Yeah, I know I was so annoying when I was a kid. Thank you so much for driving me places. But I had to learn how to contact people and call and talk to adults, and they would come pick me up and then would go.
But you didn't have the video game option. What I'm saying is, like, imagine
I did, dude.
Not like it is
video
today.
games,
you had,
bro.
Like, fucking NES or whatever.
I had Super Nintendo, Game Boy.
But you couldn't connect it to your friends that played online. What I'm saying is, like, right now, if I had buddies that lived around the corner, it's like, it's less of an option. Like, parents aren't maybe home to drive the kids over to their buddies between when school ends and when work ends for them. So if they're sitting at home, imagine if there was like an autonomous vehicle service that could pick them up, bring them to their buddy's house. They'd probably want to go play Call of Duty with them. I mean, right? Like, you still want to kind of socialize. These are your friends from school. But now it's like, well, I could just hop online and I could just play, you know, I can play them. And I'm fucking guilty of that too. Like, sometimes it's like, you get a friend and like, I just, by the time I drive there and like dick around with it, it's not worth it. Or, in the case of the kids, they just don't have a license.
Is it, though? See, your suggestion is that every stressor is bad. I'm saying without a stressor, what purpose is there to living?
Well,
like what causes
but again,
you to
you're flipping it. You're going so far
you're right.
into the spectrum.
But you and I are both doing it. You and I are both doing it. I was going to propose my happy medium. What I think is a happy medium.
Okay, lay it on me.
Okay. I think that perhaps some of these autonomous services should be only allowed to be used after you've gathered the base skills for yourself, after you've had a certain amount of time to learn. Autonomous vehicles. You got a license, you learned how to drive, you drove enough hours, years, whatever, to know how to operate this, to have this experience. And then when you're ready, okay, dude, it's different when you're 40 years old, but when you're 16, it's like, hey man, you don't know how to do anything yet. Like you got to learn some things, man. You got to learn how to deal with discomfort. You got to learn how to live in the world for the world's pressure. So, hey, maybe this can be allowed later on for other people, but you right now are still developing, and you need to learn how to develop in the real world while, having your own agency and learning how to be adaptive enough to navigate, Yeah. So maybe that's the happy medium.
Sure, and that's exactly what'll happen, right? I mean, that's what's happening now. Like, my car is still a car. I still have to know how to drive it. I still have to be licensed to operate it. I still drive it a decent percentage of the time. It's just there are scenarios where I can trust it to drive itself. That'll only get better, and then over the course of years, it'll get to the point where the cars just don't even have a steering wheel anymore. They don't have pedals. You don't even face forward. It'll be like you're getting in a room. And you probably put on a seatbelt, but like car accidents will be effectively a thing of the past. I mean, unless there are humans operating vehicles manually, there'll almost be no reason for there to be an accident, right? Because the robot cars will just know where they all are. They'll pack in tighter. They'll like potentially even link up physically so that they're like your train car will join with somebody else's train car on the highway, so that it can reduce aerodynamic drag, so that they're all just drafting each other. Like,
what if you just want to cruise, bro? What if you just want to hit the road?
Again, like you're implying that there's going to be some...
But you are too!
No, I'm not. I'm saying that...
You said we're going to link up on a car train.
I'm saying the transition will happen over years, but I think... You know what I bet will be the case is that, like, if you're fucking 75 years old and you still want, like, a old, like, gas car to drive around in manually... You'll probably just have to pay some sort of insane fee to register that, because they'll be incentivizing people not to do that. But if you have the means to do it, you'll probably still be able to do it, and you'll be able to drive around, and you'll be getting in everybody's fucking robot car way, but at least you'll be able to still drive your car around if that's something that you enjoy. But in terms of just transportation, not the side of me that just wants to go for a drive and drive fast and drive like a dick and enjoy it, going through some turns or whatever. When it comes to just getting from point A to point B as safely and as efficiently as possible, I welcome the transition. Not only just for myself, but because I think people are fucking terrible drivers and terrible at making those judgments and terrible dealing with the stressors and the decision making that you're pointing out as being a benefit. I see the worst in people on the road. Like, maybe,
of course,
if you came out here and drove for a week, I think you would join Team Autonomy.
I don't know. I don't know about that. You know why I might join it where you are? Because if you have autonomous, you can jump in the whatever it's called, the carpool lane, the one with the little diamond.
That's got nothing to do with autonomy. That's just electric vehicles getting the carpool lane.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I wouldn't do it then. I don't mind. I don't know. I don't mind it. I feel like it's necessary. I feel like everything that's been difficult for me has made me better. There's a certain amount of stress that you have to undergo. I'm not talking about like abusive levels of stress. That's not what I mean. I'm not some kind of masochist or something like that. But I think, stress is the necessity for adaptation and growth. If you're looking at it even from the most biological perspective, well, that's how we're talking about growth. My muscle can't grow. My brain, won't create certain neural pathways if I don't stress it, if I don't tax it, because I'm forcing it to adapt. So I'm changing biologically, physiologically, whatever the proper word is. My neurons are changing. The amount of synaptic connections and dendrite connections are changing in my brain. for, physically, my body, I'm doing this task, I'm putting it under stress, under load, therefore it grows, therefore it adapts. I just worry that we're kind of like signing off on, here, you handle this problem, I don't need to do it. And then, in 2 weeks, we're going to be in the Matrix, bro. We're going to we're going to be in the Matrix.
I get
man.
that. I get what you're saying, in that you're worried about this like dystopic sort of like in Wall-E, where they're all floating around on their lawn chairs watching Netflix and just getting fat. Like, that's
right.
I guess what I'm counter arguing in that case when it comes to just the autonomous cars part is that I don't think that people are that involved in driving to begin with. I think you're giving people a lot of credit.
I'm using this as one manifestation.
Sure. But in the case of this discussion being specific to that example, I don't feel like, let's say you could measure the impact on, mental health or mental development, and there was no difference whether or not people were just getting carted around autonomously, and it was safer, right? Sure. Like if it was like 5x safer to just let the cars do their thing robotically rather than let humans operate them with whatever failure rate there is, wouldn't it be unethical to not go that direction?
I don't know, bro. I feel like this is the slippery slope of, hey, it's safer for you, it's better for you, let me tell you what to do.
Yeah, but then that's the case with everything, right?
I know. That's why I said this is like one of the.
Well, then it'll net out, right? So more people are getting sort of mentally like taxed by the fact that they're not involved in driving anymore, and they'll just kill themselves. And then they would have died in a car accident. This will be the equalizer. Yeah,
this is gonna be how there's a whole
Either way, we're gonna find a way to kill ourselves, either crashing into each other in cars, or
even that's grandiose that we'll figure out a way to do it. Like, the only way we'll go out is if we kill ourselves. Right. There's no universe out there that can just smash us into bits or send a solar flare.
Right. Yeah. Maybe I trip crossing the street while pushing a wheelchair, and hit.
Right, dude, that guy launched.
He did, but he tucked and rolled, man. He seemed like he had some sort of training. Bro. Yeah.
I almost wonder if he panicked, and I don't know. he was in his little world and saw a car coming and then did a tuck and roll dive to get out of the way.
Yeah, it was lucky either way.
How about, so I want to broaden this a bit. Automation in terms of manufacturing.
I think that one's pretty clear, right? People, in terms of the concerns from society, people are worried about losing their jobs. People who manufacture are worried about losing their jobs. It's pretty simple. At its core, I think it's pretty simple. And I would argue this one's much easier from like a philosophical standpoint. I think having a factory job, let's say the job is, you bolt a panel on a car. If a robot can do that more efficiently, cheaper, whatever, more safely, that seems like kind of a no-brainer to me. The trade-off is like there's a human impact in that the person who used to do that isn't involved anymore. Their mental health is probably better because they're not performing this mundane task over and over and over and over and over.
But what are they going to do instead?
Well, that's a societal problem where like having a universal basic income for industries that are being impacted negatively by automation and autonomy, we should just take care of them, right? Like imagine if we all just sort of paid into a fund. I know
the money thing is not the part that's worrisome to me either. This
giving them purpose is what's worried.
Yeah.
Okay, but for a second, just imagine a case where you have a transition period. Like if you're 50 years old, you've been bolting panels on cars on the production line for, 30 years. Suddenly robots come into play, or we transition over 10 years. Now you're like closer to retirement. In that case, it's like maybe we transition them into some sort of like support role, and then they retire early. Like having some sort of a universal basic income would allow to like float those people who are toward the end of their career to the end of their career, let them retire early. I think it would be win-win. For people who are like, let's say in the middle of their career or starting their career, they're thinking about going into kind of manual labor-y type work, suddenly the robots start transitioning in and they're like screwed because they've gone down this path and now they're unskilled. Then it would be about retraining them and finding them something else to do, right? I think what you'll find over the next...
I don't know if people choose to be in manufacturing.
I don't think they do, but I think maybe you're forced into that because I think skilled labor will become more and more prevalent as we allow robots to do
unskilled labor.
Right. And what will likely happen is that it will screw over a lot of people, and there will be people who are like totally disenfranchised, which is unfortunate, because what should happen is that we should all be paying into a means of helping those people transition out, and then finding things that robots can't do. I mean, there are so many things that robots will not be able to do for decades that people still need to be involved with, that we could be training those people who are being displaced by the manual labor shit to take over. Unfortunately, knowing what we know about the way that governments operate and how people think, that likely won't happen. But I mean, to me, that one's much more cut and dry in terms of what should happen.
I think if there was a shift for people already getting more involved in, I don't know, skill-based careers versus labor-based careers, perhaps if we saw those fields diminishing naturally, maybe there could be an argument for, hey, we need someone to fill the gap here. Let's implement some automation in these facilities for people to do it, because people aren't as interested in it. If we haven't given them an alternative, or people aren't motivated to seek an alternative, it seems like, are they going to be motivated to find something else to do? That's how I feel about it. Or if they go there, and even if, they're not happy with it, but they feel like, hey, but I'm doing this work for my family, and I belong to this union, and me and Bob and Steve belong to this union, and we feel good that we're doing this work together in the union, and, we're doing these cars, and we buy the products and we support the companies. It seems like it's giving them something more than just doing work,
Yeah,
I guess
but
that's
again,
and if there aren't people, go ahead.
You're inferring that because they lose one thing that they can't have that passion with another thing. So imagine in this hypothetical.
I'm not.
Why?
That's why I suggested that perhaps. Well, I'm not suggesting that. I'm thinking that if there was another place for them to go with their same level of motivation and their same skill potential, they would have already migrated there. They would have already gone there if it suited them better.
No, they wouldn't.
I don't know.
Dude, somebody,
That's
again, in the hypothetical where it's the guy who's, let's say it's somebody who's 35 Bolton fenders on a car on the assembly line. Suddenly they flip the assembly over to autonomous production with robots. You're saying that, like, well, if he really wanted to go back to school and get an education and do something that was more skilled, he would have done that already? No, he wouldn't have. I mean, people don't. I think people are.
So are you suggesting that a stressor is helping him grow?
I'm saying that a change in scenario, especially one that was subsidized by some sort of, like, government fund, like a universal basic income, that allowed somebody like that to then decide to go back to school or find another unskilled job if that's really what they want to do. I mean, again, this isn't a transition that will happen unilaterally, that every assembly line suddenly will be robotic and that unskilled labor just goes away tomorrow. But those jobs will become more and more scarce. And those people, if given the option to do that, to go back to school, to get a skill, or just kind of go sit at home and do nothing. Yeah, I think a lot of people are going to choose to sit at home and do nothing. But, like, you structure the incentive so that that's not an option, right? Because we're always we need skilled laborers, skilled workers. So just prevent them from going home and collecting their paycheck unless they're, a year from retirement. Then you just give them early retirement. To me, that seems simple. Just like there are a million things that maybe I would want to do myself, but maybe they don't pay the bills, or maybe it's not feasible for one of dozens of different reasons. I think you can say that on the flip side. A lot of people just can't afford or don't have the initial want to go to school. They get sort of trapped in making ends meet, right out of high school or whatever. They have to work to maybe take care of their family, and then suddenly they're 10 years in and they're in an unskilled position. I don't know that that's. I would assume that more often.
What if the unskilled position was a way for them to get into a further skilled position? What if it was a doorway? I'm not suggesting that is the most likely outcome. But
eliminating the need to then perform that specific function could potentially fast track that, right? Because then they're not just
maybe. What if I couldn't get into the door now because I don't have an entry level position, because entry level positions don't exist?
Yeah.
And I'm too undeveloped in my, work capacity, work ability, whatever you want to call it, to get in at the level that you are now beginning at.
Sure. So transition. I mean, to really think, to polarize it like you seem to be wanting to do, like fast forward.
I'm not. Honestly, all of these perspectives, I do worry strongly that we're getting disconnected from ourselves, from what it is to be human. We're putting a little too much emphasis, I think, on technology. It's all a little, in my opinion, masturbatory. I don't know what the long-term gain of it is. I think we forget that, like...
So play it out, though. I mean, to wrap it up, maybe this is a good way to wrap it up.
Yeah.
Say it's 100 years from now, and cars are driving themselves, and factories are completely run by robots. What do you think the net effect will have been? What are people doing? What does the average sort of job look like for the middle class, let's say? People who maybe were like half and half, sort of white and blue collar before. The white collar, let's say they're more or less staying the same. Like people who work in jobs that are skilled are still kind of doing that. They're sitting at a desk, cranking it out 9 to 5. But for the people who were previously unskilled, what do you see their life looking like?
I don't know. I don't know if people that are unskilled or that were unskilled, that never pursued skills, if they would have any motivation to go do something else, if that wasn't available to them. So I worry that different factors have caused them to feel down and out and disconnected or disenfranchised from the rest of the world that may have skills, and they're just, kind of bummed out, leeching along, unhealthy, physically, mentally, spiritually, and that's where they're at. I don't know. That worries me.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't, because I'm going to be dead and who gives a shit. But I guess there's an idea that I have that we're just getting disconnected and we're spending too much time playing with our little bullshit creations. And it seems like people aren't feeling as good about it as the numbers suggest. We're making more money. We live longer in some cases, but we're unhealthier. And I don't know, man. It just... Also... Obviously, I work in a field where people come to me when they feel like shit, and they're like, "Hey, man, I feel like shit." And I'm like, "Oh, why do you feel like shit?" And my sample obviously has a bias based on all these things I mentioned. That's what I work with all day long, so that's all I see. So I do agree that I have I don't know if it's as polarizing as you're suggesting internally. I'm providing that counter argument for the sake of playing devil's advocate, but it's obviously tinted my perspective.
Yeah.
Of how I view.
And look, I share... I mean, the funny thing is, despite my giving shit this entire time, I mean, I do share that concern. I mean, I do think that we are...
I know, I feel like you turned on me, bro.
Well, I mean, otherwise there's no discussion about it. But I do think,
right.
If I could choose a time to live in, knowing what I know now, and obviously the future is unknown, but I wouldn't choose now. I think in this country, being alive... Being our age 40 years ago would have been so much more enjoyable. Things would have been so much simpler. I mean, okay, ignoring like the socio...
I live in old life, though. You live in like new world. I sit on a couch and talk to people, so I would have been doing the same shit. So for me, it's...
I'm just thinking about all the other sort of surrounding societal... Like, yes, there are certain social aspects that... I mean, in the case of us, we're white, so I guess it would have been only like... I mean, not to be an asshole, but things would have potentially been... great for us, not so great for others. But I'm just ignoring the social aspects of it in that regard. In terms of the way that life was a little bit slower, a little bit simpler. I feel like there are times in the past that would have been a lot cooler to live in. We would have engaged with each other a lot more. We're headed down this path. I don't know that the autonomous car thing specifically...
One manifestation,
It is one manifestation for sure. And I'm more worried about the internet and the connection between people, like we've talked about in the past, than I'm worried about a car driving itself. I mean, to me, I don't see that as changing society for the worse.
No, I don't. Again, I'm not expanding that into that's the one that brought us all down. Yeah. I just think that we're becoming more accepting of that idea, and that's one place that is typically a large part of someone's life. That is, it may be larger than, I don't know, some other categories in someone's life, but where that's being demonstrated, and that's like one point, and that's, it's beginning, and that's one big piece where maybe that's the more major piece that we've experienced so far of all the other versions of it, and I worry that it will further progress that way.
Well, or I mean, you're going to find out because there's money to be made here, so it's going to happen whether you like it or not. And I think it's in significant ways not so far out. I think you're going to see more and more of like level 3 and level 4 autonomy on the street around you, and then it might be 20-30 years before this is something that's sort of mainstream that you have to worry and think about and see the societal effects at a macro level. But it's coming. And I think one thing I just hope people get over is the safety aspects, thinking of these insane scenarios that will never present themselves as a means, as a barrier to entry. To me, it's like we should be looking at the positives of this should make things a lot safer.
That feels like an irrational consideration to me. I don't know about the safety concerns. Again, for the engineers and the programmers and the liability that they have to make those decisions, that part I get. But I do feel like the general public, it's like we're overdoing it. I don't know.
Agreed. Well,
to be cocky about it, I'm actually not that concerned because I feel like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. It'll be all right. I'll figure it out.
Well, you'll be driving around like a Model T while everybody else is sailing around you in like fucking robot trains.
Right. I'm gonna get a Tesla once people can teleport places. I'm like, yeah, now's the time for me to get it.
Oh shit, we didn't even talk about teleportation.
All right,
Word.
Man, fun chat.
All right, well, I'm going to go let my robot car drive me to the grocery store.
All right, man. Good talk. See ya next time.